Well, hello there. I decided for this morning's welcome and announcements to why not take the whole congregation with me on a walk around my neighborhood. So I'm glad you're on this walk, and we're delighted that you're with us here at Embry Hills United Methodist Church for our 7th consecutive morning of virtual worship. Pastor Susan Allen Grady will be preaching the message this morning on the road to Emmaus, thus too why I'm also on a road. A few announcements for this week. One being Theology on Tap is this Thursday at 7 p.m. We'll be discussing, do you believe in miracles? So grab your favorite beverage in your living room and find the Zoom link, and we hope to see you there. Also, on May the 4th, we have bingo night with Susanna Bales with the Children's Ministry. So a lot of opportunities for community coming up at Embry Hills as we continue on in this time of social distancing. That's all the announcements for this morning. Again, we welcome you. We're delighted that you are here. And now let us prepare our hearts and minds for this morning's worship service.
And his glory, of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story because I know 'tis true. It satisfies my longings as nothing else can do. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. Story more wonderful it seems than all the golden fancies of all my golden dreams. I love to tell the story. It did so much for me, and that is just the reason I tell it now to thee. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the story. 'Tis pleasant to repeat what seems each time I tell it more wonderfully sweet. I love to tell the story, for some have never heard the message of salvation from God's own holy word. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love. I love to tell the so long. I love to tell the story. 'Twill be my theme in glory to tell the old story of Jesus and his love.
Welcome to Time on the Steps. Can you tell it's me? I look a little different. I'm wearing a mask that my sister-in-law made for me, so I can wear it when I'm going to the grocery store and protect those around me and myself. And so I'm about to go to the grocery store and I'm wearing my mask. I wonder if I saw you at the grocery store, if you would recognize me, and if I would recognize you if you were wearing a mask too. Been thinking about that a lot whenever I've gone to the grocery store and seen all of my neighbors who've been wearing masks too, and all we can see are each other's eyes. I don't know if you can tell if I'm smiling or if I'm frowning. It's not as easy to do. It's harder to recognize your neighbor with a mask on, so we have to pay more attention to how our neighbors are acting and how we're behaving in stores even more because we can't see each other's faces. In the story today, you'll hear about two disciples going to a place called Emmaus. And on the way there, they run into somebody that they don't recognize. And we know that they should recognize who it is in the story. And we get to kind of be like, why don't they recognize who they're walking with? And when we talked about the story of a walk to Emmaus in our Zoom weekly call with the kids, I asked the kids why they might not have recognized that it was really Jesus walking with them. And they said maybe he was dressed differently. And they weren't paying attention. And I thought that was kind of an awesome answer. That maybe just like we get used to expecting Jesus to be one way and God to be one way, that if God showed up differently, will we still recognize? And so maybe Jesus was rocking a new robe. Maybe Jesus was rocking some new sandals. We don't know what Jesus looked like to them that day, but we know that they were expecting God to be doing something else. And so when Jesus showed up, they weren't quite ready. So I'm going to wear this mask to the grocery store, and I'm going to be making sure that I pay attention to other folks that I'm around, so that I can notice how my neighbors are doing, because that's one of the things God tells us to do, is to take care of our neighbors. And so I'll be looking around, making sure that I am paying attention to those around me, even though they don't look like what I expected they would look like. It's a wonderful, beautiful day outside, and so I'm also paying attention to that. And I hope that it's a wonderful, beautiful day outside where you are, and that you look for God and for Jesus in all sorts of unexpected places. Thanks for coming to the Steps.
Luke 24, verses 13 through 35. The walk to Emmaus. Now on that same day, two of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, and talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were walking and discussing, Jesus himself came near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What are you discussing with each other while you walk along?" They stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, whose name was Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only stranger in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have taken place there in these days?" He asked them, "What things?" They replied, "The things about Jesus of Nazareth, who was a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and leaders handed him over to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the 3rd day since these things took place. Moreover, some women of our group astounded us. They were at the tomb early this morning, and when they did not find his body there, they came back and told us that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it just as the woman had said, but they did not see him. Then he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are, and how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have declared. Was it not necessary that the Messiah should suffer these things and then enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them the things about himself in all of the scriptures. As they came near the village to which they were going, he walked ahead as if he were going on. But they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, because it is almost evening, and the day is now nearly over." So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he was talking to us on the road, while he was opening the scriptures to us?" That same hour they got up and returned to Jerusalem, and they found the 11 and their companions gathered together. They were saying, "The Lord has risen, indeed, and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road and how he had been made known to them in the breaking of the bread. This is the word of God for the people of God.
Today's story is the story of the walk to Emmaus. So we encounter in this story these two disciples, Cleopas and another disciple that is not named in the story, as they are walking on their journey to Emmaus. And I would say they're also on a spiritual journey, and that is how they encounter Jesus. So they don't know who he is at first. So as we are reading this story, one of the first things that we notice is that he appears to them. We know it's the risen Christ. We know it's Jesus, but they don't seem to know it. And he asks them what's been going on, and they look at him like he's from another planet, and they're like, how could you possibly not know what has happened? So then they began to unfold the story of all of the things that have taken place in Jesus's life, in his death, and in his not yet known to them resurrection. They don't know that part of the story yet. It's a literary device called dramatic irony, and you probably remember that from high school English. Watching or reading a play or a movie, something on screen where there are characters involved in some kind of dialogue, and one of them knows the whole story and one of them doesn't. And so you see this drama unfold as the parts of the story that are unknown to one of the characters start to become known. And that makes you anticipate what's going to happen and get really involved in the story. This is a little different in that not only do we know that it's Jesus, and they don't know that, the one that they're talking about, not only do we know that it's him, but we also know the whole rest of the story of Jesus' resurrection and the forming of the church and how the disciples spread out and began to preach and go on missionary journeys, and the life and witness of Paul and all of his letters, the writing and put together of the Bible, and then Christianity through the ages all the way up until today. We know all of that. They don't know any of that. They don't even know that the risen Christ is with them. And yet it begins to unfold as they travel. So I started thinking about how we know what we know and what we know and what we do with it. If you're like me and were raised in the church, then you may have memories of learning Bible stories, learning prayers, maybe being in children's choir or youth choir where you learn music of the faith and hymns that we sing in church on Sunday. I can remember being able to say the Apostles' Creed when I was like 5 years old. I knew it from memory because I heard it every week, and it was what we did at a certain point in the service. I can remember that, and it's deeply ingrained in sort of what I know and believe and how I communicate my faith in the world. And I also remember this sense of learning theology and Bible and our music and how we teach that. I remember this sense of being given this gift of knowledge and of experience in the church and of this saving sort of information that it was our job to go out into the world and share, that we were evangelists, that even as children and as teenagers and as young adults and as adults, that our job was to go out there and share the gospel with our lives and with our words. And so I remember this feeling that we had this special thing that we had to share, and that was our calling and who we were supposed to be. And so you grow up in that kind of environment, and you begin to think and you begin to believe that you have answers, that you have this information that will really change people's lives, that could even save them. And you start to understand, perhaps in a kind of distorted way, your role as a Christian in the world and as a person who follows Jesus. And I started to think about that in relationship to this story. One of the ways that I resonate with Cleopas and the other person that was walking along the journey to Emmaus is that what they were describing to Jesus was this sort of just all of a sudden halt of everything that they knew about how to be his follower. They may have been those who were in the inner circle or in one of the closer circles who would have traveled with Jesus and who would have known about his teaching and his healing firsthand, who might have seen him at work or heard him speak. Perhaps they were people who were helping to set the vision for how all of that was going to be multiplied and continued out into the world. And so they were part of that kind of vision casting for a world that knew, listened to, was touched by, and formed by Jesus and his presence among us. And then all of a sudden it was over. They didn't really have warning. They had a little bit of prophecy from him, but they didn't really understand it. So they didn't know that one day he would be with them at table and the next day he would be gone. And I think that resonates in a sense with us right now, not because we lived back then and knew Jesus as a human being, but because everything about our lives and about our faith lives was one way on a certain day about a month ago, and the very next day it completely changed. We stopped meeting for worship in our building. We stopped meeting for small groups and Sunday school. We completely stopped all of our gatherings like Wednesday night supper. The Scouts aren't there anymore. Preschool is now doing some calls and Zoom calls and video stuff, but is mostly over for the year. All of the things that made church life what it is and how we have come to know it and rely upon it, snack sacks, mission programs, youth ministry, children's choirs, adult choirs, all of that stuff just stopped. It just stopped. And suddenly all of the familiar and comfortable ways to do and be church just stopped. And so I feel a little bit like a companion of Cleopas and the other disciple on the journey today. And I feel a little bit like week by week, I'm telling that story of how things used to be, of how I got so accustomed to and took for granted seeing the members of the church and the people who came regularly and who attended, and being able to see your faces, shake your hands, give you a hug after worship, to listen to you as you told me face to face what was happening in your lives. I took for granted and I miss, and I'm now talking like it was the past, the ways that we interacted with one another and the ways we would gather for fun social activities and the ways we would study the Bible and faith together. I feel what I think they must have been feeling when Jesus appeared and said, what's going on? What are you talking about? I imagine that they were walking under a sort of cloud of grief and uncertainty. They knew they were going to Emmaus, but they didn't know what was going to happen tomorrow. They didn't know what their faith community, what this new thing they were building together, what would it be now? I think we feel that some. I keep seeing a lot of memes all over the internet about, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're enough. Don't let anybody tell you you're not. You're doing all the things that you can do right now. And this is related to school, to parenting, to relationships, to caring for your yard, to church. And yet I feel like in some sense we are looking for how to recreate something that we had, because as we tell the story over and over again, either in our thoughts or out loud to one another, of how things just came to a screeching halt, we're getting more and more removed from the familiarity of what was. And that's frightening. It's scary. It's unknown. It's not what we're used to, because we're used to knowing, for the most part, where we're going, how we're going to get there, and what it's going to take, and what we're going to do. And we don't know what we're going to do. We don't know when we're going to be back together. We don't know when it's going to be safe for us at any age to be in any size group in our building at church and have the activities that we're used to having. We don't know how we're going to do worship or Bible study or small groups or mission projects. We're just not sure what that's going to look like. And I wonder if perhaps Jesus is coming alongside of us and encouraging us to stop looking to the past, to stop looking to some kind of past way of being and knowing and trying to recreate that in some way that will make us feel more grounded right now and take away our questions. Maybe he's walking alongside us to listen to our questions, to ask us questions about faith and about growth. Maybe Jesus is walking alongside us in ways that we can't see yet, to show us that the answers for the world, for hope, that the ways that we can find new life springing up are not things that only we know. And maybe he's coming alongside us to show us that all the things that are happening around us that are showing us signs of hope right now are ways that the resurrection is coming to life yet again. And maybe we haven't seen them yet. So whereas when I was growing up and in the tradition that many of us were trained in, the idea was we have something to go out and share with the world. I wonder if today Jesus is calling us to look at what the world is showing us, the hope that the world is showing us in relationships, in neighborhoods that are hanging out together, maybe for the first time. I know in my neighborhood, it's a pretty social place, even before all of this, but most of us just came and went out of the neighborhood on a daily basis and sometimes got together, but not on a very regular basis. And that's really changing. I know more people and have met more people in the last 3 or 4 weeks than in the last 2.5 years of living here. And that's exciting to me. It's like we're thawing out a little bit and beginning to see that life is here. And that it's not just a few hours every night going through the routine and getting dinner and getting kids to bed and getting ready for the next day and then just starting all over. But life is happening as we meet in the streets and say hello and ask how we are and really care about what the answer to that question is. And life is getting outside and getting sunshine or watching the rain and seeing how the effects of the gift of weather and sun and water really change the landscape around us and working with our hands in the dirt. I don't really even like yard work, and yet I'm starting to really like it now. Maybe the world knows part of the story that we don't know yet. And maybe this is an opportunity for us to look for hope in places we're not used to looking for it. Outside the walls of the church, in new revelations of God's love for us through neighbors and people we're encountering, or maybe people that we're helping, or maybe people that are helping us. Friends, I encourage you on your spiritual journey this week. I encourage you to look for ways that Christ is showing up unexpectedly in your life. I encourage you to look for ways he may be asking you to tell him the story of your faith, to tell him what's on your mind, to tell him what has been happening in your life. And instead of saying, you already know what's happening, tell him again. Tell him with fresh eyes and fresh experience in your prayer life, in your conversations with your family, in your thoughts, in your own meditation, your own meditating time. Tell him again the story of your own faith. And let him show you in ways that are tangible and real and that are all around us all the time. Let him show you a new understanding of hope and life. It's there for us, friends. He is there for us. He shows up all the time. We just got to open our eyes and let him be known to us in the breaking open of our expectations and of the ways we thought it should be, while he shows us a new way that we can be his followers, we can be church, that we can be you, and we can be me, we can be ourselves, and we can be his light. May that be for us this week, friends. May we share our own stories with Jesus. May we listen to what he has to teach us that's new. And may he be made known to us as we break open a new expectation of new life. Amen.
Good morning. I'm Roger Lee, co-chair of the Finance Committee and member at Embry Hills United Methodist Church for a little under 2 years. Want to thank everybody as we get ready for this time of giving to the church for your continued support of our church and of our ministries, both inside and outside of the church. One of the opportunities that we started last year was to be part of the All for Love and Love for All AIDS Walk team. Last year we raised over $4,000 that benefited people living with HIV and AIDS. And in this time of COVID-19, it's really important that we don't forget about our communities that are going to be severely impacted by what's going on now. Please continue to support our ministries as much as you can, and we look forward to the time that we can all be together. God bless you.
Good morning, friends. I invite you to join with me in prayer for church and for world. Creating and sustaining God, we thank you for the beauty and the wonder of the Sabbath morning in the springtime, a time of the earth awakening and singing your praises in all kinds of ways. And we add our own hallelujahs to nature's song. Lord, we have much to celebrate, but still we need to pray for those in our congregation who need your healing. People stricken by illness, loss, brokenness, homelessness, addiction. We pray that you will be their rock and salvation, their strength and their mercy. We pray for the state of all creation, for a world plagued by a virus, for a divided and broken nation. We know now that we will not be returning to the old normal, but on our journey to the new normal, wherever that may be, whatever that may be, remind us to be on the lookout for you on the road. Help us to hear your liberating word. God of resurrection and hope, may your transforming Spirit open our hearts to welcome you into our isolation and enable us to put our fears and frustrations aside and embrace life in the Spirit. And in that Wesleyan way, may your holy word set our hearts on fire. And when we do see you on the road, remind us to invite you to stay with us for a while, to have a bite to eat, to say goodbye to the old days so that we too may say, Christ is risen, Christ is risen indeed. So bless the new day, bless the new life, and continue to walk with us down that long and sometimes winding road. Amen.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Amen.